funny thing happened over the weekend. Twitter, which has long indicated government affiliations on certain accounts, they were marked that way. Well, they applied that to the CBC and other state broadcasters around the world. Here's an example. I mean, this is the Twitter account of China's foreign affairs spokesman. So you can see it says China government official on it. So it's a government official. Here's a state broadcaster. For example, this is Putin's state broadcaster called RT, or Russia Today. Do you see it says Russia state affiliated media right there on it? Those are not so much warnings as they are disclosures. I mean, just to let you know what you're getting. But for years, Trudeau's CBC state broadcasters did not have a warning label. The CBC would pump out their content, and people weren't warned or advised that they were consuming government propaganda like they'd be warned if they were watching RT or Al Jazeera until this weekend. Take a look there. Government-funded media. Of course it is. Of course it's government-funded media. There is no doubt about that. It is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of fact. They get a small amount of money from selling ads, but each year they get most of their money, way more than $1 billion, wrung out of each Canadian by the force of the state through your taxes. You cannot opt out. It's a tax. It's a government broadcaster, and they don't really deny it, do they? I mean, here it is, literally that same CBC Twitter account saying so themselves a few years ago. Here's a tweet. They were talking to some guy named Mike. Hi, Michael. We are government funded, but that only covers a portion of our expenses. Advertising helps us cover costs across all platforms. So, of course they're government funded. But boy, did having someone else say that make the CBC mad on the weekend when Twitter itself posted it on their platform. They went on a bit of a pout. Here's 3 tweets in a row they did. Twitter's own policy defines government funded media as cases where the government may have varying degrees of government involvement over editorial content, which is clearly not the case with CBC Radio Canada. Oh, really? Are you sure? First of all, it is a factual fact that they get government money, and that's all that's said there. They are a creature of a government statute called the Broadcasting Act, and their board is appointed by the government. Where is the dispute here? But to claim that they are not partisan or not partial, what a joke that is. I mean, I just kept laughing when I saw this over the weekend. It was classic. This is the CBC's At Issue panel. That's what they call it. They were having a discussion about the Trudeau Foundation. So hosting this, you've got Rosemary Barton, the CBC fangirl of Trudeau, who literally asked Trudeau for a selfie. And then later she went on a weird platonic date with him, asking him all sorts of odd personal questions. It really was weird.
Why do birds suddenly appear every time you are near? Just like me, they long to be close to you. Why do stars fall down from the sky every time you walk by? Just like me, they long to be close to you. On the day that you were born, the angels got together and decided to create a dream come true. So they sprinkled moon dust in your hair of gold and starlight in your eyes of blue.
Oh, and I forgot to mention that Rosie Barton, in the final weeks of the 2019 election campaign, she personally, as in her own name, joined the CBC as a corporation in suing the Conservative Party of Canada right before Election Day. So you've got her hosting this neutral and impartial discussion. And then you got Chantal Hébert, who literally worked for the Trudeau Foundation. And then you've got Andrew Coyne, whose cousin literally sits on the board of the Trudeau Foundation now, or maybe she resigned last week, I'm not quite sure. And then, of course, rounding it out, you have Trudeau's authorized biographer and all-around fangirl, Althea Raj, who literally wrote a love story about him and published it as a book. That's the CBC panel. The entire political spectrum from A to B. The entire geographical representation of this country from Toronto to Montreal. The same crew that's been mumbling their establishment talking points for 15 years. All the hair dye in the world will not make that crew seem young or fresh, my God. But imagine calling them independent. Yeah. Who put together that panel? I mean, seriously, was that Gerald Butts who produced it? Anyways, let me keep reading from the CBC rebuttal. They said CBC Radio Canada is publicly funded through a parliamentary appropriation that is voted upon by all members of parliament. Why don't you just call it tax money? Its editorial independence is protected in law in the Broadcasting Act, as we said in our statement from last week. But that's the opposite of true, isn't it? I mean, the Broadcasting Act explicitly tells the CBC what they have to do and say, what to argue and what to promote. It's right there in the Act. The very fact that the editorial decisions are laid out in a parliamentary law proves they're not independent. It's not proof that they are independent. That's such weird gaslighting. And here's the last part of their rant. In addition, our journalism is independent and subject to our journalistic standards and practices, as well as an independent complaints process through the CBC Ombudsman. Yeah, really? That's the same Ombudsman, for example, who took months and months and months to weigh in on this bizarre CBC propaganda. Remember this?
I do ask that because, given Canada's support of Ukraine in this current crisis with Russia, I don't know if it's far-fetched to ask, but there is concern that Russian actors could be continuing to fuel things as this protest grows, but perhaps even instigating it from the outset.
And then he gently criticized it. But that reporter got a raise and a promotion. The CBC has a policy of following Trudeau's policies to the letter. That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.